Hi, my name is Ramya. I'm an assistant professor in civil engineering at Cornell University. And my co-lead on this paper is Abdul. He's a senior engineer now at QuickRead. So the both of us have been working on this terminology chapter. There are two parts to the terminology chapter. The first one is, like the title suggests, what do we even call this technology? And that's what we're going to talk most of the presentation on. And depending on time, like 17 minutes. So depending on time, we'll go into the other terminologies. But there's going to be a quiz. So I want you all to actually pay attention to all these terms because as Claudiane said, we are looking for feedback. So your input will be really valuable. And I'm going to go into each of those acronyms and tell you what are positives about it, or, what we can use and cannot use. So I just have this short video for what we... We don't need volume, but you can see how this technology is where you could place material layer by layer. The material is getting extruded, and we can make any shape that we want to make. That's the whole idea behind how 3D printing is different than other technologies. I did say 3D printing because that's what most people call it, right? So the question is, what should we call this? These are all the acronyms. So I'm going to go at each of the acronym and talk about what's being done. But the main idea is you have a material that's being extruded, and it's being placed layer by layer, and it's following a certain path. So you could ask, what's in a name? That's what Shakespeare said, right? What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, and then that would be the end to this discussion. So that means we could say that which we call 3D-CP by any other name would still behave the same. So you could say what's in a name, right? Then we'll be done. But however, it's not that simple. It's really important to pick the right terminology, right name, because if you pick something that's too narrow, you're not being inclusive, so then that term is not as useful. But if you're too broad, then you have to go into the specific details about your specific, how do you fit into such a broad name. So it's really important to pick something that's right and something that's not wrong. So I'm going to start with 3D-CP. So I used Web of Science statistics to tell you how often this term has been used. So 3D-CP has been used 175 times. There are two different ones that show up, 3D concrete printing and 3D concrete printed elements. So you'll see this quite a bit in all the terms that come. They're just, could be 3D-CP, but they're just used differently. And there's some that come up with like other things too. So this 175 includes 3D capillary porous materials too. Okay. So the next one, which is 3D PC, has so many versions. Are you ready to see how many ways this acronym has been used? So many. So the ones on the left side that you see, they're all for cement-based materials, and the right one are not relevant to us, so all these include in that 160. But you could see how it's 3D printable, or printed, or printing, and people have tried to use concrete, cement mortar, cement-based materials. That shows that there's some hesitation about calling it concrete, so the question is, should we call it concrete or not? So the definition for concrete, when you see this so there is CT23. These are terminologies that are defined by ACI. It's a published document by itself. And you can see how it says it's a mixture of hydraulic cement, aggregates, and water, with and without admixtures, fibers, or other cementitious materials. So in this one, it doesn't actually specify the size of the aggregates. It's very general. It just says aggregate. So then the question is, could we just call this concrete, even if there is like we're not pumping large coarse aggregates, right? We're only pumping, most of the work is less than 4 mm aggregates because of the pumping limitations that we have. So mortar is defined as a mixture of cement paste and fine aggregates. So we're all mostly printing with mortar. And there are papers now where, coarse aggregates are being used for printing. So the question is, can we just stick with concrete? That's the biggest question here. So when you look up the definition for ultra-high performance concrete, it's a concrete, but it doesn't have any coarse aggregates. So we are okay with using the term UHPC, then why is it a problem for 3D printing? Because even UHPC, the definition doesn't say anything about aggregates. It says more about, it's about the performance, right? So they're talking about what's the compressive strength? Is it flowable? Does it have fibers? Is it ductile? But then in their emerging technology report that came out in 2018, you could see that they gave examples of 2 mixture designs, but there's no coarse aggregates in them. So I'm just trying to show that there is previous use of concrete for a material that actually doesn't have coarse aggregates. I hope you're all paying attention to this because you have to give me input on like what you're voting for in a way, right? So, going by that example, you could define 3D printed concrete. So similar to ultra high performance concrete, this is 3D printed concrete. So 3D printed concrete is a concrete that can be pumped, extruded through a nozzle, and can be placed layer by layer to achieve optimized, desirable shapes. So you can make any shape that you want by using 3D printing. This is just like a rough example. So I think I like 3D PC over 3D CP. This is again my personal opinion, so that's why I put it's my opinion. Because it sounds like UHPC, it's 3D PC, concrete comes in the end, instead of concrete coming in the middle where it's 3D concrete printing. It's all very small changes in the terms, right? Okay. So another terminology that has been used is C3DP. It's shown up 6 times. But for this one, I put C3DP and concrete because like there were like a lot of other random things coming up. And this was reported 2 times. And even in this, you could see there is concrete and construction. So it's the same terminology, like the acronym is the same, but both concrete and construction show up here. DFC is a really popular one, but I couldn't just search for DFC. So instead, when I did the Web of Science search, I changed it to, I added digital, fabrication, and concrete. So I searched for all 3 words, had to be there somewhere in the document. And then these are the terms that showed up, and they showed up 475 times. So DFC is quite popular. So even this, there's digital fabrication with concrete, digital fabrication for construction, in construction, fabricated, which is past tense, digital concrete fabrication. So there are a few different variations of this too, but this is quite popular. So DFC actually comes from the Rylam Technical Committee 276. This was active between 2016 and 2020, and then they published a paper in 2020 in CCR on this topic. And what they were trying to say in this paper is that this digitally fabricated concrete, DFC, encompasses different types of automated construction, if you want to use that word. So it's not just 3D CP, but there's contour crafting, there is D-shape. So they're trying to make it all inclusive, and they have a broader name called digital fabrication with concrete. So closer to home, there's an ASTM committee on additive manufacturing. This is committee F42, but this is not just for concrete. The committee focuses on additive manufacturing in general. So they have coined this term additive manufacturing for concrete, so AMC. And this is a process to join materials to make structural and non-structural elements or components and systems from 3D model data, usually by depositing material layer upon layer, as opposed to subtractive and formative manufacturing methodologies. They also have additive construction, where they say that when this is relevant for construction applications, then we could use additive construction. And this is important because if you look up definitions for manufacturing versus construction, manufacturing is something that you make by hand or machines. In a way, if you think of it, we are making concrete by a machine, I guess. But then they say it's like, when we think of manufacturing, the main concept is we don't think of concrete or we don't think of the construction industry. So this one I didn't Google. I actually went and found a dictionary source. And when you look at construction, basically says the construction industry. So the definitions for the two, there is a difference. But the other thing I want to show is this one, the North American Industry Classification System. So this is where when companies fall into different categories, then you could see that there's different ones for construction and for manufacturing. So the sectors are different by themselves, because concrete, whatever we're doing, it's mainly for buildings that we're using them right now. So should we stick with construction and not use the term manufacturing? That's the point of this one. That should be, because sometimes people refer to this as AM. I should have actually done another search with AM and concrete, I guess. I did not do that, so I did miss that one. But the question here is, should we stick with construction and not use manufacturing? So this also came up in the meeting last time. It's not just my opinion. Last 6 months ago when we had these discussions, the general consensus was, let's not use manufacturing, let's use construction. Again, you'll get your say, so don't worry about it. Nothing is final. And so the next question is, should we use construction or concrete? I think for me, the main sticking point over here is I am surrounded by, not over here, but I'm surrounded by enough people in general that think that by 2050, we're not going to be using concrete at all, right? So I would like the terms to actually have concrete and not just be very general, because we want to make sure concrete is going to be around. I guess you all agree that concrete is going to be around by 2050, right? It's not going away. So if you want to use both construction and concrete, then it becomes additive construction with concrete. So it's similar to the ASTM one. So it's, instead of AMC, it becomes ACC, where we've replaced construction, manufacturing with construction. Or the other one I've seen is additively constructed concrete. So that's past tense. So it depends on which one do we like better. Okay. So there is another new one. Sean is over there. I told him this is a plugin. So NIST has a new consortium, and so they're calling it additive construction by extrusion. So there's another term in here where they're calling it by extrusion. So, but the additive construction is similar to the ASTM technology. So the question is, do we need extrusion in the term, right? Okay, so it's your turn now. There's a QR code. If you can't use the QR code, there's also the tiny URL link. I want you all to vote and tell me, what do you all like? Feel free to ask me questions. I can check on my phone and see. I can tell you now, like, how many responses, who voted for what. It's anonymous, so I won't know who voted for what, but. Oh wow, we have 10 responses. $18. $24. This is awesome. I'm loving this real-time feedback. Okay. So we have 34 responses so far, and 57%, which is a reasonable majority, like 3D PC, 3D printed concrete. And then the next one is by 28% is additive construction with concrete. So we are thinking of running this poll again in the committee meeting tomorrow, and that way we can pick the right terminology. The other reason this is really important is because each chapter has also been written by multiple people. So in different parts of different documents, we refer to it by all the combinations of things that I've shown you. So this is a process of unifying it. So we'll pick one term tomorrow, hopefully, and use it in the entire document. So thank you so much for giving your feedback. If I have my email in the end, but if you have suggestions or you have strong opinions on something, please shoot me an email. I would love to hear more about your thoughts on the terminology. Yeah. Okay. I'll open it up for discussions. These are just like other terms that we're going to define. Yeah.
So this is a great job, and this is extremely necessary. So as you know, so ACI, STM, and also ICC, they're also working on, just the different, standard, different specs. So I'm with, besides with ACI, I'm also with ICC, the 3D committee, and right now I'm just the group lead for the material group. Okay. So this is great, So what we want to do from that side is, try to be consistent with what you are doing. We don't want to cause more confusion. So anything, you you work out from here, we will want to put more inputs also, so we're consistent across all this, okay? So this is very difficult. It's not easy to choose one,
yes.
Right? There's so many different opinions, okay? A good example is, just 3D printed, concrete or 3D printed mortar. So you mentioned the UHPC. That's a really good example, just stay with the concrete. But the challenging is, we have to realize the test method between mortar and concrete, there's some similarity, there's difference. And also there is, once we talk about the performance specs, there's also difference.
Yep.
So we need to put that into consideration, right?
But I think all the tests are different with 3D printing because you can't just do a compression testing because it's not isotropic. So you have to do it based on your layer orientation. So even simple tests become complex when it comes to 3D printing. So it's not just concrete, it's 3D printed concrete or 3D printing with concrete, whatever we decide. But it's not just concrete, it's 3D PC. I think that's where the difference is too.
Yeah, but also, but then if you talk about the performance, for the testing, so there could be two kinds of testing, right? One is just the material itself, evaluation and approval, qualification. Another one is coming from the job site. That's the one you have to, as you said, you have to really do the markup, cut out, do the just different dimension, to do the strengths. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, especially when we go back to the laboratory, so for mortar, should we do 2 by 2 inch, cube, or should we also go into the cylinder? So that's a discussion we will have more, maybe tomorrow.
Exactly, yeah.
Also,
and we're also going to have some technical documents for each of those topics because guidelines, because they're all complex and they're not simple. Yeah.
So another example is for shrinkage, right? So for concrete, typically we want 0.05, just shrinkage. But for mortar, that's just more challenging. So should we have another, just a criterion for mortar? So just comment, asking. It's a very difficult duty, but we will be working together to get this done.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Comments?
I thought it was a great talk. Thanks, Dr. Nair. I wanted to ask if you think, and maybe we've already done similarly with UHPC, but how much we're considering the sort of marketing aspect to it, and that UHPC, great, it's concrete. We know we build things out of concrete. You don't immediately think of mortar as something that we make bridges out of. You think of it as something we lay bricks with, or, brick and mortar. A building, maybe there's a similar aspect here, not just with concrete versus mortar, but also that 3D printing sort of associate it with this new sexy technology. I don't know if there's anything to be said for that.
I really like that perspective because it's not just using as brick and mortar, right? You're not just using it as to put two bricks together.
Right.
We're actually doing our entire structural elements with them, or the wall elements, however you want to call them. So I see how it's about how the material is being used and giving it a more broader. That's why I started off with saying you can't just be very narrow, then the usage becomes less. So thank you for that perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, great job. I think one of the things that people should know is that we've spent a good amount of time discussing this. I think we've had maybe 2 or 3 meetings in which all we discussed was just trying to define this term here. And I think the other commentator brought up a good point in terms of the fact that concrete, the general public kind of have a good idea about what that is. I do not like the idea of using manufacturing because when I think about construction is a specialized type of manufacturing, let's say, where typically manufacturing, you're thinking about goods and objects that's going to be sold to the consumer. And construction is unique to our field. So I think we should, own our field.
Exactly.
And not necessarily go towards the manufacturing term. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Other thoughts? I'm leaving my email up here for long enough so that you will actually email me if it's something that you don't want to share over here. And like Reze said, we've spent enough time, and this title came up at the end of our meeting last time, where we spent so much time discussing what should it be. So, and we want to make sure that we finalize this sooner rather than later. So your input would be really appreciated. Okay, thank you so much.